So I think I'll do a short briefing for Brother Said and also Brother Khairul. So I'll start with the introduction, and I'll invite Dr. Isham to speak first, and then probably I'll pass the spotlight to Brother Khairul and then Brother Said, which whoever wants to go first, and then we'll do some Q&A, and if that's all, yeah, if there is nothing else to share, then that's all for today. So all right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Wabihi nasta'in. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Good morning to fellow audience, listeners, whoever's watching this from any corner of the planet. Welcome and thank you for joining us this morning. We are here to listen and gain a little bit of knowledge regarding one of the greatest phenomenon known to mankind, which is the Big Bang Theory. Okay, and today our speaker and commentators will try and unravel the hidden gem behind this phenomenon, which was originally being theorized by a famous scientist named Stephen Hawking. Speaking on today's program is Associate Professor Dr. Isham Pawan, a lecturer from the Department of Usuluddin, IIUM. Our first commentator, Brother Khairul Ahmad, a student of Aqidah and Islamic Philosophy from UNIDA Gontor, Indonesia. And our second commentator would be Brother Said Ibrahim, from Department of Usuluddin, IIUM. So let me tell you a little bit about what I know regarding Big Bang. So basically, Big Bang is the theory which states that the universe is expanding or has expanded or still expanding due to a large explosion called the Big Bang billions of years ago. It was founded by Stephen Hawking. I believe he was the first one to bring this theory to life. So without further ado, I would like to call upon Dr. Isham, okay, to discuss a little bit about this topic. And the floor is yours, Doctor.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank the organizer for the kind invite. Now, Big Bang Theory, well, what is not, it's not Stephen Hawking actually, but it doesn't matter lah. He did probably popularize it rather than invent it. It was actually noticed by a couple of radiologists who were studying who were studying something else. By accident, they found out that there are different temperatures throughout the different cosmos, and that's why the argument was that it probably was that the initial start of the Big Bang was in one place, and as it expanded to other places. Okay, and therefore you have the different temperatures. Why the different temperatures are? Now, what's important about the Big Bang? That's question. We are more interested in the issue of the technical issue rather than the Big Bang itself. Now, as the argument was that the universe expanded from an initial state of high density, and as it explains a broad phenomena, a range of observable phenomena, the abundance of light element, cosmic microwave background radiation, and different temperatures in different parts of the universe. So the argument was, where it first begins, it has a higher temperature. As it expands, it now has certain places have a lower temperature. Now, so what's the big deal? Why is Big Bang a big deal? Now, you had the argument was where the steady state model argued that, oh, the world is eternal. It has no beginning, it has no end. Now, this is not a new, these models are not relatively new. Steady state model was always in classical Greek philosophy. We have the argument, well, the world is here. Why discuss whether it begins or not? The assumption was it was always eternal. It's always been here. Now, the Big Bang theory does not explain where the original stuff was, or where did the original stuff begin. In other words, as it expanded, what expanded, where did it begin before the expansion? But the interesting part, or at least the ethical element, or what we are interested in now, as the Big Bang starts to become very, very popular, the theory now is accepted by almost all scientists as a possible explanation of the universe, the expansion of the universe. It provides two very interesting. One, the argument was that the universe has a beginning. Right? Before, it was assumed, and the steady state model assumed an eternal universe, meaning had no beginning. And the assumption was, if it did not have a beginning, it should not have an end. Now, the two assumptions of the Big Bang model as it expands, right? The argument was, one, it had a beginning. Now, the world that exists is an existence after the Big Bang, as that whatever thing that expanded creates the world, right? Now, it also has an argument for an end. As the world continues to expand, as the universe continues to expand, the argument was that it will become unstable. Right? The expansion will become so unstable that it will collapse. So at least for religious people, it has the two explanations. One, an argument for beginning. Two, an argument for actually an end of the world. It's not an eternal expansion. Right? As the argument was, it will become unstable. As it expands more and more, it will become unstable and it will collapse. So that's as far as religion is concerned, that's the major issue. Now, because it has a beginning, beginning is very important. Why? Because it has a beginning. Now the argument is what causes it to begin. Right? So now we have an argument. Oh, because it must have if it has a beginning, something must have caused it to begin. So the argument was for the existence of God, something that precedes the beginning and creates the beginning. So for many scientists, actually, before the Big Bang theory, there were a lot of skepticism of whether the world has a beginning or not, whether God exists or not. And now, because of this Big Bang theory and the argument that there is a beginning, and because there is a beginning, there must be a cause. Now, we assume the assumption of the cosmological argument or the Kalam argument. The Islamic argument for the existence of God is based on the wajibul wujud, the necessary existence. Now, necessary existence is based on like this argument, right? As you exist, Benjamin, for instance, as you exist, I must assume your parents exist or once existed, right? So from I infer now that your parents exist. As your parents exist, I infer from that your grandparents exist, blah, 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 etc. Until we reach what we call the wajibul wujud, the existence which is not cause, the first existence. So the necessary causation, the causation is accepted. We have the argument that because the world is cause, there was a great assumption. The assumption was that the world was eternal. A steady state argument was the world is eternal and therefore has no cause and therefore has no purpose. But now we have a cause, a beginning, a cause, something that brings it to be cause. And because of the argument for infinite regress, the rejection for infinite regress, there cannot be a now if there was never a beginning. As today is Friday, yesterday was Thursday, the day before, So if there was no single day that starts it all, there would never be a Friday like today. So this the argument for Big Bang actually changes, not most for most of us, as we are believers in the idea of creation, but for trying to convince someone that there is a creator. As the world was, the contention was whether the world was created or not. Right? As many would argue that, you know, okay, then you would say, oh, if the world was created by God, who created God? Then the question was of infinite regress. We have this problem of, right? If he goes backwards and backwards and backwards infinitely, there would never be a beginning. And therefore, there must be a creation which is not created. In other words, God exists and he brings everything else to existence. He's not caused by himself. So this becomes a major issue. Now, why is it a major issue in philosophy of science, for instance? Now, as I said before, strangely enough, as people now, as you and I know a lot more than your great-great-grandfather knew about the world. A lot more. Now, you attribute, you know, the Greeks used to attribute, why is it that the moon does not fall down? Why does the moon not fall down? Everything else seems to fall down. Why doesn't the moon fall down?
The absence of gravity, I think.
What is gravity? Before Newton, people didn't know what gravity was. Why do planets actually don't fall down? Now, if you follow the Aristotelian argument, right? It says everything has desire. Like you have desire, right? You ate breakfast today, you have a desire. You were hungry, you ate breakfast, right? So there is desire, you have a desire to have certain things, goals, you create all these things. So he actually said that nature also has a desire to perfect itself. So you today don't understand nature in that manner, like your great-great-grandfather, who probably understood nature in almost Aristotelian terms. As Malays used to believe that all things have spirit. So when you pass by a jungle or you want to pass through a jungle, you ask cucu minta what? Permission basically to pass through the jungle, arguing that the tree has life, have desire, have power, and have spirit. Everything has power and have spirit. And some people even still believe it, I guess. But now you discover Newton and the mechanical worldview. You have rejected all this. Only human beings have desire, nothing else. Now we see the planet having a mechanical worldview that it acts, it reacts, it does not act. Right? As Descartes finally argues, right? One of the major mistakes people make, they assume that their cat acts. He says their cat does not act, it reacts. Only human beings act. Act means that you plan to do something. You choose to do something, and therefore you plan how to. If you wanted to go to your father's house, okay, now you cannot travel. Let's assume you wanted to go somewhere. You plan now, okay, what do? I plan to get a car, or whatever transport, etc., etc. But I have to have that desire to go somewhere. So this is planning. Only man acts. All other things in nature react. Now, the problem becomes a major issue today is as people now know more and more why the moon does not collapse because of gravitational rotation, right? It's centripetal force. Because it's moving in this direction, it does not collapse. It does not fall down. Right? Everything else seems to fall down. So we see now that these are not the desire, that the moon itself does not desire to fall down. Aristotle used to believe that all these things are what we call heavenly bodies. They actually have their own desire, their own nature, their own spirit. The planet itself is alive. Now you don't say that the planet is alive, it reacts. As we start to study centripetal force and all these other force is force, acceleration force, and all these are the modern language you use, not before. We never used this word before in Greek philosophy. So now, why is it that modern man, the more he knows about nature, right, he thinks that, oh, we don't need God. So as the example was when surveyed more and more scientists, well, before 70, 60, 70% of scientists don't believe in God. They do understand how nature works, right? And they attribute it to these forces. Why then do they not understand? Why do they do not see God? Now, when you look at the Quranic argument for nature, right? Man is unique. To give this example, when this man goes out to sea, it was calm, but as he was trying to fish, it suddenly becomes there is a storm. As the storm becomes very dangerous, he remembers God. But by the morning, the storm disappears. And what does he say? I am a great sailor. Instead of saying, oh, so he remembers God in bad times, he forgets God in good times. In other words, the Quran says, look, the opposite should be happening. God is just not there in the exception, but God is there in the rule. Why the sun rises in the east and sets in the west is because God creates the nature of the sun to rise in the east and set in the west. In other words, it's not logical. It's not a logical necessity that the sun should rise in the east and set in the west. It is a fact, yes, but it's not a logical necessity. In other words, there's nothing in the sun that makes it to do these things. So God creates the nature of these objects. So what we have here is that in most cases where you do today, you study what we call secondary causes. You understand how it works. Why does the water boil at 100 degrees centigrade? You know that water boils at 100 degrees centigrade. Why it boils at 100 degrees centigrade, you do not know. God creates the nature of the water to boil at that temperature. That is what we call primary causes. But because of the argument, because of the struggle between the church and Galileo, between the church and scientists, that the Christian civilization has started to separate as the church oppressed Galileo and tries to find miracles. Religion is miracles, not in Quran. We do not have an argument for miracles. The Prophet has no miracles. The miracle is the Quran itself, the hujjah, the argument that is given in the Quran. And the miracle is in the regulation or regulatory nature of the universe creates the points to God. So we have the argument for, what's the argument again? Why is the concept of ayat or ayatullah, that nature points to the creator. The regularity of nature points to the creator, not the exception. What we have is the fascination with the exception. I don't understand why. So when you watch this, there's a movie recently called Reaping. Reaping talks about the miracles of Moses in challenging the Pharaoh, right? So the scientist starts to explain, oh, Why are there so many frogs? Because of certain temperature that happened at that time. Why? Because the frogs therefore produce other animals, etc., etc., etc. So all those miracles of Moses against the Pharaoh could be scientifically explained. But does it mean that if it was because of the scientific explanation, does that explain away God? It is God who creates the nature. So why is it that you don't see this? So the argument for Big Bang, as I said before, for most of us, it's not we don't really understand it as why is it such a phenomenon? Why is it so important in the scientific community? As I said, the scientific community has started to give an idea that because we can explain the phenomena, we don't need God to explain the phenomena. In other words, because I want to know what the temperature of water boiling, I don't need to say God create the water, the temperature, the nature of water to boil at that thing. I can use, without including God, I can actually give prediction. What should I do? So almost all scientific theories could be explained just using what we call secondary causes instead of resorting to primary cause. Okay? So why is it so important? This actually now starts to change the idea. First, as I said before, many scientists assume the argument that, oh, the world did not have a beginning. The world is just like this. So what we do is, when Newton discovered gravity, it did not say God causes gravity. This is how the world works. These are the attractions. These are the equations. Now we use the term force, acceleration, energy, etc., etc. So it does not have to say, oh, God created it in this manner. As I said before, the Western civilization had this struggle against the church. And therefore, the antagonism towards the church by scientists continues even today. And of course, this Western understanding of religion is sometimes problematic. Religion is seen as miraculous. If it follows nature, it's not religion. It is the miracles that are religion. Whereas in the Quran, we argue for both. In other words, the regularity in nature actually shows you God. The irregularity also shows you God. But the irregularity is the exception. The rule generally is the regularity. So, as I said, why this Big Bang theory becomes so important? Once that the argument that the world has a beginning, then it has a cause. If you want to explain the cause, then you have to say what? Unless you want to start to argue that things can happen without a cause. There's no causal relationship, which is actually quite problematic. There are some who wanted to argue that. But to argue that such an important event to occur and not have a cause seems to be very difficult. So with this, many scientists now are starting to review the idea whether there is a God or not. Now, once there is the explanation that God exists, then you have to argue, well, is there a causal relation? Did God cause this for a purpose? Now, there's an issue of purpose. There is argument, as I said, there is argument for something to come into existence and leave existence. But this argument is very hard to accept. Or the idea of a subatomic world, whether subatomic world must have a causal relationship or not. But in the physical world, as we explained, almost all things have a causal relationship. And to assume that the causal relationship, because something causes it, there must be a purpose for it. So let me stop here. I mean, I can go on, but I would prefer to entertain questions, and then we have an informal explanation. As I said, Big Bang theory for us do not have major ethical implications. But Big Bang theory for, let's say, a person who has theistic or atheistic tendencies actually have big problems, because for the atheist, Big Bang theory actually starts to argue, oh, if the world had a beginning, it must be caused. If it has to be caused, it must be caused by something which pre-exists the world. And what else is that if not God? So let's see what's your explanation. I mean, what your inquiries are. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Isham, for the meaningful and very insightful explanation regarding the Big Bang and the nature. Before we move on to the Q&A, I would like to give the floor to Brother Said Ibrahim for to continue with his comments on the Big Bang.
Sai,
Please, the floor is yours.
if you can tell me what are your concerns. I mean, I know I didn't go step by step because I assume most of you know quite a lot about the theory itself. As I told Shukaira last time, I did not see it as a major ethical issue, but I do understand once I started to that for a Western audience, especially for Western scientists, this became a major issue as a starting point. If the world has a starting point, it must have a creator. And therefore the issue of creator. But for us, it's not that big an issue. We assume there was a creator already. Even the Big Bang actually doesn't explain where the original stuff begins with. It assumes a singularity, a term singularity that expands to create the Big Bang. But where the singularity comes to exist before that was not explained. Even the concept of space is not explained. But let's see. Tell me what you would like to, what is lacking in the presentation. As I said, I probably take this thing too simplistically, and it might be a little bit more complicated for you.
Okay, thank you, Brother Benjamin, and also Dr. Isham. I think you explained it very well and simple as we can understand. And I also understand the concept. Generally, not to going too deep from the particular thing, but I think that yeah, I saw that the theory of Big Bang is trying to understand the nature of the world, how it starts. But I think that there is some questions that the scientists still can't answer it in terms of why it is happened. So this must be an answer from the other side, not from the science perspective, but in terms of religion perspective. So this shown that it is not science can answer everything. It must come to another perspective to answer this kind of questions. In terms of why this happened, why this Big Bang happened. Because I think Islam, when I saw the explanation, Islam does not have any problem with it, because it is just trying to explain the phenomenon of the world. So yeah, I think that is from this point of view, I think.
All right, good. As I said, I don't see major problems. Religiously, I don't see a major problem. But whether the Quran supports it or not, it doesn't really discuss it in that manner. Now, all this idea that kun fayakun, the Quran doesn't talk about kun fayakun directly. God works through steps. Now, you remember the sentence, the verse which talks about rain. Right? It uses the term, when hot air will rise, as it rises, it becomes condensed, and God causes it to rain. Right? This shows that what God works through what we call a causal relationship. Why does it have to work through a causal relationship? If not, you don't live in a world you can understand. Now, there was a Ghazali made this argument, right? He said, now look, you know, you watch Harry Potter, right? Right.
Yes.
Now, Harry Potter, I don't know why your generation is so fascinated with Harry Potter. Harry Potter goes a chaotic world, a world which is unpredictable, right? So Ghazali asked the question. You know, there was a case of a man who died, and these villagers were going to bury him in the middle of the night. Now, supposedly this man was a very bad man. So the accusation was this man suddenly turned into a dog and ran away. In other words, to show God's power of how bad this man was, he turned him into a dog. You know, for Malay, dog is very insulting. For an Englishman, dog is the next best thing, you know. So as you watch Harry Potter, right? The guy said, if I was not born a man, I would prefer to be born a dog. But for a Malay, it was insulting. So I asked the question. My sister kept insisting to me, this can happen. This shows God's power. I said it's impossible. Now, why is it impossible? Ghazali basically agrees with me. He says, he gives the example in Kitabul Ilm. He says, look, can God create a boy which turns into an elephant, which turns into a book, and which turns into a bird, and it flies away? Okay? He said, yeah. Yes, can. Will God create something like that? He says, never. Why? Because if God were to create a world full of chaos, man cannot live in this world. We will not know what to do. Knowledge will become impossible. In a Harry Potter world, knowledge is impossible. All right? But for some strange generation, for some strange reason, man is so fascinated by, they think that now they control science so much, they are bored with science, and they wanted to create a world which is so unpredictable like a Harry Potter world. But actually, in a Harry Potter world, you cannot have knowledge. You cannot know what will happen. So how do you know what to do? So as I said, the nature or the mechanical worldview, I know there are some people who disagree with me that Islam does not, I argue Islam accepts a mechanical worldview. The Descartes' mechanical worldview is, I can argue, acceptable. But because it's a predictable worldview. Why is it predictable? Because human knowledge becomes possible. If it was a Harry Potter worldview, you will have no knowledge. You will not know what it is. So that boy is not a boy because he can turn into a bird. All right. So that, but people like the idea. It's fun, but it's strange. It's a world which is unpredictable, and therefore knowledge becomes impossible. Unlike the Muslim worldview, which always talks about, or the Quranic worldview, which always talks about knowledge, God had made this thing. Not that God cannot make it another way, but man cannot understand if it was formed in another way. And therefore, human knowledge will become impossible. Therefore, human responsibility will also become impossible. Right? Question.
Yes, I think that is intahaf wa falasifa regarding how Al-Ghazali tried to explain this to show that Allah can do this kind of thing, but Al-Ghazali didn't state that there is no causal connection there.
So the causal connection, of course, that one is a different argument. Ghazali is contradictory. Yeah? Ghazali is very problematic, contradictory. When he wanted to prove the argument that God can do anything as Qudra, power, then he started to argue God does not have to work with nature. But when you read other parts of Ghazali, which argues that in Kitabul Ilm, for instance, he said, without the causal relationship, knowledge is impossible. So you have to be a little bit not selective. Like Ghazali is a problem sometimes. Ghazali is like a debater, you know. Debater is he has no position himself, but he actually takes the position which whatever he wants to defend. So when he wanted to defend against the Mu'tazila, the argument of God's power, then he took the argument that God does not have to work through nature. But when you look at the Quran always talks about a specific order. The world is created in 6 periods, in 6 stages. Yes, but at the same time, you have kun fayakun. But it's created in 6 periods. Now, without this order, the human mind cannot understand how things work. If we cannot understand how things work, how do we know what we should do? And how do we become responsible for our action? I give you a simple example. Lunch is closed, you get hungry. Why you eat? If you don't accept causal relationship, why you eat? How do you know that the eating will cause you to be no longer hungry? But we basically accept a causal relationship. We behave as if a causal relationship is true. And so that's the only reason why we become responsible for our actions. Yes, Khairi, Khairul, is it that want to give other one?
Yeah,
Yes.
can I add because okay, sir.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
It is. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam.
So before I begin to explicate my question, so I just want to say that I am very pleased to be here. So it is my first meeting with Dato here to discuss together. So I'm here from in Indonesia, and all of the presenter and the commentator are from Malaysia. Yeah. I want to raise two problems maybe regarding the issue of Big Bang. The first one is related with the Big Bang itself, and the other one is related with the from the religious point of view. So the first one is that there is some scholar who is suspicious, Islamic scholars actually. Professor Bruno Gueridoni, he is Muslim astrophysicist from in the Paris. So he argued that if we try to make the Big Bang as the argument for the existence of God, this is very dangerous actually, because the Big Bang itself does not explain about the beginning of the world itself. But as we can, as it is very obvious in the Stephen Weinberg book, the first 3 minutes. So the Big Bang is explained after the Big Bang, but not the Big Bang itself. So the first 3 minutes, what happened before this minute, Big Bang did not talk. So that's why comes the idea of singularity. And in here, the singularity itself talks about the big breakdown of the theory of general relativity by Einstein. So that's why modern physicists trying to so we need another theory to explain the singularity itself, which is actually talking about the subatomic world. It is the Planck scale, and there he come, and so this is actually the big question that modern cosmologists or physicists is trying to solve. That is how possibly the within two different worlds. One is the macro level world, sensible phenomena, and then in the micro level subatomic world, there are two different laws. So in the macro we have general relativity, and in the micro level we have quantum physics. And then that's why people like Hawking, Roger Penrose, and another trying to unify this theory, and then yeah, this that there are everything, because this theory will explain in both worlds, macro and the micro level. So yeah, this is the first problem, and then the second is it is actually from the what is actually the meaning of creation? It is how God, who is immutable and simple, related with the temporal origination. So, how possibly? So, it is very different. It is different between origins and the beginning. Origin is about the ontology, and it is the issue of metaphysics, and then temporal is about the physics. But if we bring God into uh, uh, in the very area of creation, which is we know as temporal origination, how possibly God related with origination? It is problematic because if before God create the in before God create the world is temporal. So what God did before He creates this before the origin of God, the world. So this is also problematic from the religious point of view. So what's God doing before He creates the world? So there is no up. So this is from religious the second problem that I want to say. Yeah.
All right, Ayrul, you present interesting arguments. My problem is, look, this. Stop seeing Big Bang Theory as the answer or final answer. Now, Big Bang Theory is important for this reason. It actually now starts the scientists to start to think, oh, the world has a beginning. That's the first thing that we must know. Now, therefore, there must be a cause that begins the first. Why did the world begin? So the argument was, look, we are now actually scientists now starting to say, oh, the world is not eternal. There must be a causal relationship. That cause must be God. So at least now all this, I know that we are not satisfied with certain things. But it actually made scientists now to, it's now, no longer scientists will start to argue, oh, the world is eternal. Therefore, there is no God. So theism, or an accepted form of theism, now becomes acceptable, at least in the scientific community. So we should, as religious people, not nitpick too much. We say this is actually one victory. In other words, that the Big Bang Theory has become more and more acceptable. It is a theory which actually can include God inside. Now, what does it mean? Yes, of course, we're not satisfied. You talk about the 3 minutes. I know you talk about this argument that God does something is an issue in itself, of course. God is eternal, not temporal, and therefore this argument when we talk whether God can talk to his prophet or not, whether God actually interferes or intervenes in history or not, that is another issue. But that's beside the point. We must see this Big Bang Theory as, in a way, is a victory for us. At least now scientists can start to say there is a beginning and therefore there must be a cause. So instead of just referring to what we call secondary causes, they must look for now a primary cause. It is the God who creates the nature of everything. Not just to discover, Newton discovered gravity. Newton did not create gravity. God created gravity. Man discovers how things work. They do not create how things work. So for me, Big Bang Theory, as I said, is not so much for Muslims themselves, but it is for scientists who had actually a problem with whether the idea that the world is eternal or not, that we need to study beyond what we call the secondary causes. Right? So for me, yes, it's not perfect explanation, but it is actually a scientific explanation as it becomes more and more acceptable. Now scientists got to think of not just how the world works, but why the world works this way. So for me, that in that way is a victory for us. So don't nitpick too much lah. You know, if you want to criticize,
Yeah.
scientists can go so far lah. If you want to start discussing like as I said, the Big Bang assumes an initial singularity. It assumes this thing exists. It did not ask the question before the Big Bang, where did this thing come from? It only explains after the Big Bang, right? So of course, for us, this thing was created by God, and therefore, if it went through the process of a Big Bang, it's not necessarily against the Quranic idea. So, but as I said, for the scientists, this is considered a major transformation, and therefore, the argument that there is a beginning. As I said before, the argument was steady state. As the Greek argument was before, when you were born, the world was there. Why assume that it was not there before? So that's an internal argument. At least now you have the beginning argument. And the beginning is an important question for most scientists to understand. That's why I said when you all choose the Big Bang theory, as far as religion is concerned, the Big Bang theory doesn't prove all that much. But it does prove there is a beginning. And if that beginning is there, if we accept the beginning, then we can accept a causal relationship, and therefore the creator who creates the creation. The world itself is a creation, not an internal thing.
All right. Thank you, Doctor. Does Brother Khairul have anything to add or to ask?
Okay, maybe enough.
Okay. Brother Said, do you have anything else to add or maybe to ask?
Yes, I think I want to explain about the explanation, one of the after the Big Bang, whether it is keep on expanding faster or it will be a reverse back. So some of the scientists criticize the theory of the big bounce because it will not deflate. The universe will not deflate. It will expand. And it became more faster and faster during the time. And in terms of what we see, the Big Bang itself, I don't know whether it's, some of them say it is an explosion, some of them it is an expansion, but how it is expand is very interesting because we can see that it is not an explosion as we can see like every day in our life. It is not scattered without pattern. It is scattered with a pattern, which is show that this cannot be without cause, without something that can make it as a pattern. Very beautiful in terms of making it as galaxy and universe. And when I read some of the explanation in terms of the like in the Muslim context, when they translate or understand the WASATI IIUM, some of them understand it as a day, some of them understand it as a period. And also the Christian, when we look to their interpretation of the Bible, they also have the same understanding. They said that for the fundamentalist Christian, they understand it as a day. But for the liberal Christian,
there is no day without the sun. Day is 24 hours, the sun moving around the earth. So without that, you cannot say it's a day. It must be a period.
Yeah, but that is the fundamentalist.
I know. They take it everything literally, therefore
yes,
it makes no sense.
But the liberal Christian, they doesn't agree. They come up with the same as the what we call as the period or the era. So this also show that how we interact within the revelation and science. So we cannot deny the role of God there, because science cannot explain that kind of explanation. Even the Greek civilization, they also discuss about the origin of the universe, but still in speculative understanding. But from our perspective, Muslim, we need to answer the question that the science cannot answer. So we cannot deny everything that comes from the West, but we need to analyze it and to make sure that it is not until that we can say that, oh, we accept fully from the West and denying what we understand from our perspective. So I think that's
good. No, look, as we discuss these different issues, right? How science, Big Bang is one of the theory. Now, as I said, if you argue for the expansion can go. There is an argument by Einstein arguing that as it expands, the world will become unstable because the attraction is what holds it together. Right? As I said, your solar system is one solar system because of the attraction towards the sun as it moves around the sun. Right? So the argument was that not only is there a beginning, they actually said that the Big Bang occurred somewhere 13 billion years ago. Right? And therefore, because of the rate of expansion, etc., so they calculate back there. So the argument that the world had a beginning, but it also can be attributed that the world will end. So the argument is actually Big Bang argues against an eternal world. And that's actually very important for us. So for scientists today to start to accept the idea that, oh, you cannot just explain the how, but you must explain the why. What creates the gravity? Why does gravity behave this way? So we now have a God who gives it its nature. So the Quranic concept of nature works through order. Very important. God does not create. Yeah, I know that you're all popular kun fayakun, but kun fayakun occurs through order. Why? I said without the order, a human being cannot understand the world they live in. We are not talking as religion is miracles. This is problem. Why you don't see God in everyday things? It is the nature that God that you see God, not just the exception. That's why the Quran kept arguing. Prophet Muhammad has no miracles. But no, the Muslim insists he has so many miracles. But the Quran argues that you have already matured enough that the mind can see reason. That miracles no longer is important. Keep forgetting, Moses had the most number of miracles in the Quran, and he had so few followers. The Prophet, our Prophet, has very few miracles, if any, has the most largest followers. So issue of miracles, you must see God in order, not in chaos. Stop thinking of religion as something supernatural. It is part of nature.
Thank you, Doctor. Anything else, Brother Said?
Benjamin, you don't have any question?
I do, but I'm passing the floor to fellow commentators first before I continue with my.
Go ahead.
Brother Said seems like he's thinking about something, about adding something, or maybe questioning.
I think from now, I think there is no question for now.
Okay. Thank you, Brother Said, and also Brother Khairul, for that add up. I think it's very insightful, meaningful. We've had a very meaningful conversation with the Dr. Isham. Okay, so now I'm reading, this is an opinion by one of the audience. He said that, personally, I too don't see anything problematic with Big Bang Theory. Okay, it doesn't exactly deny the existence of a creator or his role in it. But that is coming from an IIUM RKUD, Revealed Knowledge Usuluddin Department student. But maybe for a more general Muslim, it could be problematic. So what is your take on this, Dr. Isham?
I don't see why it's problematic for anyone, frankly speaking. I'm not saying it is the Quranic answer. Right? I'm not saying that. But I don't see why Big Bang Theory, as I said, Big Bang Theory, you keep seeing, you're forgetting the audience. A Big Bang Theory is promoted by scientists who used to believe that the world is eternal. Now you have scientists questioning that, oh, the world has a beginning. Large numbers of scientists, but I think the Big Bang Theory is probably the only theory that now people entertain as a beginning, at least scientists entertain, no longer accepting this idea of steady state or eternal. This now have made scientists question whether God exists or not. And they now have, because there's a cause, there's a beginning, there must be a cause, and therefore the most important thing about the Big Bang Theory is now it proves a causal relationship, and therefore God creates the world. Of course, they don't use the term God, right? But they use the term, if there is a cause, what else can be the cause? Can there be many causes? Can there be many gods who create the world? Probably not. As the Quran keeps arguing about order, right? When you look at the world, there is order. If there were many gods who created the world with different ideas, there would be chaos. But there is order. The planets do not collide. So it also, see, the Quran gives arguments for trying to prove the cosmological argument. So the Big Bang Theory supports what we call the Kalam cosmological argument, Wajibul Wujud. Because there are many questions were asked. How do you know that the world comes to exist as a beginning? If it has a beginning, then of course the argument that it must be brought to exist, then fine. But does the world have a beginning? We did not live to see the beginning of the world, right? But the Big Bang Theory basically now argues, no, the world has a beginning. And actually says, oh, 13.8 billion years ago. It's good for you. I don't see why we as Muslims should be saying that, oh, this is wrong. Therefore what? What alternative do we have? Kun fayakun. This insistence on kun fayakun, God created, therefore it creates. Even the Quran talks about periods, God creating through natural processes. So as I say, I don't see any problem with, I don't say that, I'm not saying that the Big Bang Theory is the religious theory. No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that at least the Big Bang Theory now proves the argument that the world is created and therefore questions the idea of a creator who created the world. And so it's good for us.
Okay, all right. So thank you for your take on that POV. The first question I would like to ask is the reason for God not creating a Harry Potter world, like you mentioned just now, from a man turns into an elephant and to a bird, it's because it goes against the divine mercy.
No, it does not go against divine mercy. It goes against that he created a man who can understand the world that he lives in. Without understanding the world you live in, how will you know what to do? Then why would you be held responsible for your action? Let's say you cough and your house falls down because you cough. It's possible, right? In Harry Potter world, yes. He moves his whatever, the wand and something happens, right? How can you be responsible for a world like that? What kind of God makes you hold you responsible when you don't know what your actions will achieve? So he creates a world in which the human mind can understand processes, can understand causal relationships, and therefore become responsible for his actions. So although I said God can create any world he wants, but he does not, because as I said, the purpose is to, the world was created for man, right? not for God. The world was created for man. I
Okay.
know lah, all of you like Harry Potter. Harry Potter was fun, but if you were to live in a Harry Potter world, it would be total chaos.
True. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that answers the first question. The second one, can I see religion as supra-rational instead of super-rational? Oh, yeah.
How do you differentiate supra-rational and super-rational? Supra
Not
means
sure.
that you cannot understand how it
Okay.
works. Is that the meaning?
Ah,
Supranational means that above reason.
okay.
You forget man is special because of what? Akal. Why are we different from other animals, or we are the superior thing? Because of akal. If the akal cannot be used, then why are we special? The akal makes us responsible for our actions because we understand our actions. So all these argument, oh, reason, I have some fake student also who tells me, oh look, if the religion was rational, you would not be able to do, when you do tayammum, you wash the bottom of your feet, not the top of your feet. No, you're making a mockery of understanding the religion. The faith is for the benefit for human being. As we talk about, why is all this washing your hands today so important, cleaning yourself, saying this is all hygiene, which Islam used to talk about. Right? As we talk about, bathing and everything else becomes an important issue because of human hygiene. So the Quran is not irrational. I don't understand this fascination by trying to understand religion as irrational. Always then it becomes religion. If we can understand why we pray 5 times a day, it's not good. We should understand. So I don't understand this question. I'm sorry. As
It's
the
okay.
Quran talks, the unique thing about the Quran, it talks about looking at the world. Muslims are the one that actually introduce observation, experimentation. The Greeks did not introduce experimentation. The Greeks were all very theoretical. They didn't care about it. But instead, the Quran said, look at the world, how it works. That will point to your creator.
Okay. So this is an elaboration on the second question. It says here, it's beyond rational, sir. It's not exactly irrational.
What is beyond rational? I cannot understand why. Maybe now I cannot understand. I'm not saying I understand everything. Maybe at the moment I cannot understand. Like a child cannot understand why why my son wanted to give up studying mathematics. He said, what's the point of studying mathematics? Divide this, multiply this. I cannot see the purpose. But because father says so, maybe father knows better than me. So I accept that probably is good. So now my son is an engineer because he actually continued to study mathematics. So now he said, oh, now I understand how important math. But when I was 7-year-old, I did not. So there are things maybe you may not understand at the moment. As God tells you to do these things, you do not understand. But you do believe that God tells you for your benefit. As God does not benefit whether you pray or not pray, you benefit whether you pray or not. Whether you do all these good things or bad things, God does not benefit. God does not harm. But you are harmed by these actions. So, supra-rational means that maybe at the moment you do not understand, but does not mean you cannot understand.
Okay. Thank you. So the third question, okay, why scientists believe that the world is eternal, why the same scientists that believe the world is eternal proposes a theory which is the Big Bang Theory, that suggests the world has a beginning.
Now, as I said before, because of the struggle between science and the church, as the church oppressed Galileo and oppressed scientific discoveries, from the argument for that the world is the earth revolves around the sun revolves around the earth, to now we accept that the earth revolves around the sun. Now, science, and I said, is not common sense. Huh? Now look, you actually are sitting in the chair and not moving, but actually you are moving. As the earth revolves around the sun, you are moving actually quite fast. Huh? But because relatively everything else is moving, you feel that you are not moving. So the idea that science is common sense is not true. Actually, it goes against common sense, that the earth is round, right? Instead of flat.
Yes.
You feel flat, right? Everywhere you walk is flat, but the earth is actually round.
Yes. True.
We don't think of it that way only because now we see pictures from the space of how round the earth is, that we realize, oh, the earth is round. Not so the idea of common sense is another issue. So why scientists? This is a problem if religious people cannot resolve with science. Science today dominates. You would ask your doctor advice, not your imam advice. People now explain about the world. You don't go to see your imam. You go and see your scientist, right? So science is very influential today as we learn more and more about the world. But so we need to try to reconcile, not accept everything to be perfect. So this idea of Big Bang Theory, because the scientists don't tell me where the initial singularity come from, therefore, cannot. It's cannot be the case. You have to come to some form of reconciliation.
All right. Thank you, sir. So this is a reply to what you have answered regarding the second question. He said that exactly, sir, that is what I meant. It is rational, but we for now cannot understand it in this moment. So while irrational things, we understand it enough in the moment to describe those things as not rational against rational.
Okay, I accept that. Sounds good.
Okay. So there are a few more questions. I'll take two more questions. What is time actually? Does it exist outside the universe?
Time. Ooh. How old are you, brother?
I'm 20 years old.
Now, why are you 20? Because you have changed.
I've lived. Yeah.
You have changed. Time is motion. Change. So when from your baby, you are now you, right?
Yes.
You have changed. So change, motion is time. We measure time in terms of how things change. So of course I know there are numerous theories about time, but time in itself is God is eternal. There's no change. There's no time because God does not change. However, I change. You change. The world changes. As it changes, that's how we measure time. I don't know what else you want. There is nothing else that's eternal. Everything changes. As the world, universe changes, everything changes. Therefore, we can measure time in terms of change.
All right. So this is the last point from the same person who asked you about the supra-rational question.
Sure.
He said this is the last point from me. It is ironic that despite science dominating world right now, many people misunderstood on what science really is. Is it true? What is your take on this?
What do you mean what science really is? You forget, right?
I mean,
you forget that Islam actually accepts a very scientific worldview. We accept the idea of order. Sunnatullah. We have to study order. So we understand how the world works. So the scientific explanation actually is very much, in many cases, is acceptable by religion, by Islam. As we throw away all this superstition, as the Quran now brings an argument against all this superstition about all this, whether all these karut things that we now accept. So I don't see, as I said, the more the scientific explanation is actually accurate, there should be no problem with religion. We should not see, the problem is when our ulama don't understand science and don't bother to understand science. And see that the scientific, many actually say, oh, the scientists now are taking the explanation authority away from the ulama. It's not that problem. The ulama don't want to modify, to change. That they should now understand basic scientific theories and include that in their explanation of religious explanation. So this is the sad thing about it all. All these all want to juggle their authority. So the ulama is too lazy to learn anything else, and therefore say, "Oh, this is the explanation." Whereas, the Quran now rejects all forms of khurafat, all forms of and argues instead for Sunnatullah. How can we, as people who talk about Sunnatullah, don't understand how the world works? That is science.
True.
So
Yes.
I don't know. I hope like this. The reconciliation between the two happen, and instead of we do not have this struggle between church and science, but we have inherited the Christian struggle, and therefore it comes into the Muslim struggle. So when the Mufti want to talk about, he talks about all sorts of strange things, does not include scientific ideas. How can he do that? So we cannot understand psychology without understanding the human framework, the mental framework. Instead, we talk about jinn and all these other things. This is not the Quranic argument.
All right. Thank you, Doctor. This is perhaps this would be the last question, I think. There is a theory, okay, of multiple big bangs that lead to multiverses. Again, multiverse, like this is not the only universe that exists.
This is a little too complicated as far as the idea of multiverse. It was actually addressed by Ghazali also,
Okay.
Ghazali asked the question, is this world that God creates the best of all possible worlds? He gives this argument, right? Let's say you have a rich uncle and you have a poor uncle. You are sick. You go see them both, right? One gives you $100, the other one gives you $100. Now the rich one, you say, what sort of uncle do I have? He could give me a lot more, but he only gave me $100. I am very sick. The poor one gave me all his money. Right? So if God were to create a lesser world, would God be stingy?
No,
if he could create a better world than this world, shouldn't he have created a better world? Ghazali, I'm not talking about anyone. Ghazali gives the argument for, if you are familiar with Leibniz also gives another argument of the best of all possible worlds. His argument was, God would, because of the nature of God, God is good. Whatever he creates is good. And therefore, he does not create a lesser world. So this argument for multiverse, you have to ask science fiction. I don't know about multiverse.
All right.
But the argument was that the world that we live in, even is an imperfect world, is the best of all possible worlds. The combination. See, problem is people always see how could God create evil? Yes, there is evil, but there is a lot of good, right?
Yes.
I mean, most people want to live even though their life is difficult. So meaning that in most cases, your life is good. There are problems, yes. So, but people always focus, oh, how can God create evil? Why he allow evil? Yes, the evil has a purpose. So we have to discuss that in a different one, not here. All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Doctor. So I think that sums up our discussion for today. Thank you so much, especially to Dr. Isham, for taking your time and
No problem, no problem. Anytime,
giving
brother.
us and sharing us meaningful knowledge regarding the Big Bang and your take also on the nature and science and religion. Thank you, I bid to Brother Khairul and also Brother Said for adding up a few questions and voicing out your opinions regarding the same topic, Big Bang. So thank you. I would like to say thank you to the audience who stayed with us from the beginning until the end, or the ones who listened a part of the lecture discussion today. So thank you all. May Allah bless us with the blessing of faith and also ilmu. So I think that's all for today. I would like to end this discussion with the speaker Farah was Surat Al-Asr. All right, thank you for all. So that's all for now. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam, Doctor.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi.